Hey there, Abraham. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. You're gonna read Harry Potter today, right?
Yeah.
That's exciting. I heard you like the movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's great. Well, so we're gonna start with the first book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you haven't started yet?
No.
Okay. So this will be our first look at the book.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Well, here's what we're gonna do. Since this is a pretty challenging book for your grade level, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use some things, some resources to help us remember and retain what you learned today. So, I brought a notebook, okay? And on this side of the notebook, I'm going to have you write down any significant chronological event. You know what a chronological event is?
Like, what happens?
What happens in
What
time,
happens
right?
in the book.
Yep, and what happens in the book. So you're going to write that on this side. There's a line through the middle. And then on this other side, anybody that you meet, any new person or character, you can put on this side and then write down like who they are and what they're doing. And so we're going to periodically stop as we're reading and we'll write a couple things down. And that'll help us. And then at the end, we're going to have a little quiz. And then it'll just help us remember as we read along in the book. All right? So you go ahead and start reading and I'll help you out when you need it.
Chapter 1. The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley
Yep,
of
good.
number 4 Privet
Actually. Yeah.
Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you'd expect to be
Involved. Yep.
involved in anything strange or
Mysterious. Good job.
Because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Dursley was the
Director. It's a long I.
Director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck. Although he did have a very large mustache.
Isn't that a funny word? Why don't we write that down just to remember? We'll just make another thing down here. Do you want to write that down? We can remember that word and we'll put it on our flashcards later.
And Mr. Dursley, he's the new
Yeah, you want to write that character down? Yeah.
Mrs. Dursley was thin and blonde.
Yeah,
Blonde.
it's a silent E. Isn't that a weird word?
And had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on neighbors.
Neighbors, very good, very good. That's a hard one.
The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere.
Good. Why don't we write down any new characters we've met now before we go on to the next page?
So there was Mrs. Dursley as well, and Dudley.
Yep, let's write those down. We don't really know anything about them yet, do we?
guess the story's about them. But it's not. But okay. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but they also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would
Discover.
discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Dursley's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Dursley pretended
Yeah, good.
she didn't have a sister because her sister and her good for
nothing
husband were as Dursley-ish
Good, very good. That's a complicated one. On Dursley-ish.
as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors
Yep, good.
would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that Potters had a small son too, but they had never seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away.
Nice.
They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Dursley woke up on the dull, gray
It's the day of the week.
Tuesday,
Nice, good.
our story starts. There was nothing about the cloudy sky to suggest.
Those two G's make a sound together. Suggest. Yeah.
That strange and mysterious.
Good. Second time we've seen that word, isn't it?
Mysterious things would be happening all over the country. Mr. Dursley hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Dursley just gossiped
Good.
away happily as she wrestled.
Yep, the W is silent. Let's write that one down on our vocab list. That's a funny. Wrestled, yep.
A screaming Dudley into his high chair. Should we write Mrs. Potter?
Yeah, let's write Mrs.
She's
Potter.
the character.